Welcome to hour number 3, our third and final on this Football Friday, live right here on the early line. Our final hour here on SportsGrid this week before we are live in person in Las Vegas, starting bright and early on Monday morning. 5 a.m. for us out in the desert, 8 a.m. Eastern time. It's Pro Football Today. Myself, Donnie right side, Kevin Walsh, and Joe Lisi will have you set with everything you need to know for Super Bowl 58 between Kansas City and San Francisco. We are just 9 days out now as the countdown has officially reached single digits for Super Bowl Sunday in Las Vegas. We will continue to preview the big game here, big ball game out in Las Vegas in this third and final hour. Some early picks, some early previews. Mike Blewitt, the superstar of the SportsGrid Network, joins us here in this third and final hour. So much to get to in this last hour, Donnie, up until 11 a.m. Eastern.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff to set the table for a big weekend overall, specifically there in college basketball, and certainly the NBA moving towards their all-star break coming up shortly as well. The trade deadline next week, packing our bags, getting out to Las Vegas. The network going East Coast out to the West Coast, and we'll do it in style.
The SportsGrid PJ, that private jet picking us up early tomorrow, flying us out to Las Vegas, coming back and getting Donnie right side so he gets there in prime time in Las Vegas. What a week it is going to be out there inside the Media Center on Super Bowl's Radio Row inside the Mandalay Bay Convention Center on the Strip in Las Vegas. He is Donnie, I am Ben. Let's welcome in that SportsGrid radio audience. Sirius XM, channel 159. All of our radio terrestrial affiliates now in the mix as well. We get you set for Super Bowl Sunday. And for some of you, getting you set for Super Bowl Sunday might be a breakdown of the game. The Niners a 2.5-point favorite, over under 47.5. For some of you, it might be the commercials, but I agree with Donnie's assessment. Commercials are leaked now. A Paramount Plus commercial came out yesterday, a full week in front of the Super Bowl. It was hysterical. I would love to watch it during the actual Super Bowl. Is it the food, those wings, the meatballs, the chicken parmesan apparently that is at the SportsGrid Super Bowl party, or is it the halftime show? Yeah, meatloaf for some of us as well. Donnie, most of the public at SportsGrid TV on Twitter in our Fade the Public poll says the game is their favorite part. And who could fault them? Of course it is the game. One final football game in the 2023 NFL season. Following that, though, is food. You raised this point. I second it. Halftime show getting no love. Is that an Usher thing? If it was Rihanna like last year, would the public be a little bit more invested? I wonder.
Yeah, it is. I thought it would be a little bit closer, and also from the game perspective, because as we know, the reason why it gets massive ratings is not because of the hardcore football fan. It's the party atmosphere around the Super Bowl. It's people that generally don't like football or just casual fans. Where are you going to a party? Everybody typically goes out to a bar, out to a party, or at least has the family gathered in the living room. And that means everything, which includes the food here. So if we're saying the game is the most important thing, and of course, most of our SportsGrid TV account guys who are following it are very well in tune with how the NFL gets down. Handicappers, gamblers alike, we like to unite. So yes, the game is the most important thing because we love handicapping the football game and all the prop bets that it entails. But if you get a wider audience here maybe voting on this, I think that food's going to come in a little bit higher, and also the halftime show as well. Now, the interesting part for me, Ben, I voted for food here. And the best part about this is I haven't eaten dinner since August. So I actually won't even be eating food during the game itself, but I voted food because of all those wonderful years and years and years of the pizza and the wings and the hoagies and the chips and the dip and the beer and the vodka and the alcohol. I won't be partaking in any of that, but still those memories made me vote for the food here. So there you go.
Donnie, you can't just say with zero context to our audience out there, you haven't eaten dinner since August. He is fasting. That is what he is doing. Intermittent fasting for Donnie Rightside. It's why he looks so svelte. It's why he is getting ready for Las Vegas. You crack me up at times, man. Food is my second by far. The game is number one for me. Unlike some of the crazy takes we have heard here on the SportsGrid Network over the last 24 hours about your feast on Super Bowl Sunday, I'm a traditionalist. Chips, salsa, nachos, wings, buffalo chicken dip, whatever it might be. Pizza, beer, plenty of beer. That is my focus on Super Bowl Sunday. Now, not on the lovely FanDuel Sportsbook just yet, but across the marketplace, there are some odds out for what Usher's first song is going to be during the halftime performance at Super Bowl LVIII. One of the longest prices is my personal favorite, and if he opened with it, man, I might shed a tear. It was a 25-1 number on My Boo, an all-time ballad with Usher and Alicia Keys, which might happen at some point throughout the halftime show. I don't think it leads off, though, because you don't often open up with a guest performance as well.
Yeah, and you're not going to go to like a slower song, right? Where it's like, Burn or something like that. You got to be like, makes a lot of sense here because you want to get the crowd going.
Yeah.
You want to get those good vibes here. My Way is going to come out of there, but you need that electric song right out of the break, which again, DJ Got Us Falling in Love. I think maybe has a chance to close it down is really just get the people going and away you go into the second half. But the thing I love, like in the 90s, early 2000s, man, Usher was king out here. So I'm going to enjoy this halftime show, no doubt about it. It'll be interesting the way he opens it up, probably more lively at that point. I don't think Confessions is coming into this, but would love to see it out there, to be honest.
I would love to see it as well. I think I could see a heartfelt ballad mashup midway through, all really based on Confessions Volume 2, right? We get a little Confessions, we get some Burn, we get some My Boo as well. Maybe with an Alicia Keys sighting as well. What that would do to the Super Bowl halftime numbers, I am electrified. Last year having Rihanna was sick. One of her first performances in a long time. Broke the internet announcing another pregnancy. That was huge as well. I really do think, though, Usher is going to put on a great show. Believe it or not, Donnie Rightside, a young Ben Stevens would play Burn and think about the lovers that he never had because he was only about 9 years old. I love Burn. Love Burn as well. I would love for that to open up. I think it's going to be DJ Got Us Falling in Love. I think that's going to be the opener because I really expect that to build the atmosphere very early on out in Allegiant Stadium.
Yeah, the one thing, you don't want to have that phone call like Usher had in Confessions, Ben. So, you know what I mean? We'll have some more good vibes here on the show. We want to have some high energy type stuff to get the crowd pumping. We don't want to be like, oh no. Don't say that. Don't say that. You know what I mean? We don't need that, right? We need good vibes in our lives. So
right.
There you go.
Right. Good vibes. Yeah. Can't have any of those calls that would lead us astray or talk about our infidelities. No. For us, it's good vibes. It's a focus on Super Bowl LVIII. It's giving you all the angles you need to know. And we do that up next with Mike Blewitt. It's a Football Friday to get you set for a Sunday, a Super Bowl Sunday, 9 days away in Las Vegas. Next.
Super Bowl is set in Vegas. We get a rematch from just a few years ago.
The only consistency in the playoffs has been Travis Kelce.
Brock Purdy, back-to-back weeks throwing one touchdown pass, right? He can't win MVP with one touchdown pass.
Hey, I hate the Chiefs, but I bet on them.
This is going to be a game that is played inside a field goal now from a spread perspective.
All that matters is there's one game left, the big game.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
I can tell you, like, Las Vegas is heavy San Francisco territory. All right, there are a ton of Niner fans, man, in Las Vegas and in Nevada, and specifically Reno. Reno's close, obviously, right? So, like, Reno's numbers will be a little bit different, but the total of 47.5. I get it.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
Jordan Clarkson is a walking bucket. He will shoot you in games. He will shoot you out of games. But he's the perfect sixth man for a team looking for bench production. A guy that can go get his own shot.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Purdue on the road in a very difficult place to win in Piscataway, New Jersey. Not in Jersey Mike's Arena, but in the rack. And it was tight.
You still have to win these games. Like, you can talk about even equate it to the NBA. Like, OKC just rolling into Detroit, going, yeah, this is going to be an easy victory, and not coming away with the W because you're not focused here. Good move there for the Purdue Boilermakers. You can take a look at Zach Edey.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
One that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Live right here on a Football Friday, getting you set for Super Bowl 58 out in Las Vegas. Every single guest that we have had on this edition of a Football Friday, well, I guess outside of JY, that's kind of ugly of me that I just did that. Well, every other guest on this Football Friday edition of the Early Line will be out in Las Vegas with us next week inside the Media Center, inside Mandalay Bay on Super Bowl Radio Row. And that includes our guy, Mike Blewitt, joining us here on this Football Friday on the Early Line. He's flying out to Vegas tomorrow night. We're excited to see each other next week in person. Blue, we appreciate your time here on this Football Friday.
Fired up, obviously. We got a big week in front of us. So a couple of more Football Fridays to go. Excited to be with you guys out there, obviously at the MGM Sportsbook Radio Row and all that kind of stuff. So we'll have some great interviews and obviously looking forward to a great game and probably an insane atmosphere around it. That's the thing I'm anticipating.
Yeah. 9 days away now. The countdown into single digits till Super Bowl Sunday out in Las Vegas. It's the Niners and the Chiefs. Blue, we've seen a little bit of movement for this spread, but since the line opened up late on Sunday night following conference championship weekend, it has been under a field goal. That's really how things stand in Super Bowls as of late. We have not seen more than a 5-point spread in nearly a decade and a half in Super Bowl history here in recent times. A 2.5-point number now in favor of San Francisco, the over-under 47.5. Blewitt, do you expect Super Bowl 58, the game that we see in 9 days, to be as close and competitive as that line indicates?
I do expect a competitive game, yes. What I would be cautious of is, obviously during this 2-week period, you can talk yourselves in and out of any single prop or line on the board. And I think it's important to sort of quell the noise around you and just evaluate the game as best as you can. Obviously, listen to people like us to make sure you don't get caught in some sort of 10-leg parlay in order to think that you have the Super Bowl nailed. What concerns me right now, just macro, is that one team has played really lights out, particularly on defense, and the other team has not played their best brand of football. That is the 49ers. I know that the Chiefs gave up some points in Buffalo, but they were able to contain them in the second half and in the fourth quarter when it mattered. The Chiefs' second half defense has been spectacular for almost the entire season, and I think that's going to really have a large influence on this game. The Niners knowing that they need to get out in front and play from in front like they've been unable to do so far this postseason.
Mike, let's focus on the Chiefs here and the movement throughout the regular season and the preseason on them being Super Bowl favorites. Because quite frankly, the Chiefs are in the Super Bowl this year. Beginning of the season, nobody's shocked by this. But if we look at the odds, they were a quality football team over the first couple weeks of the season and hit that bump. But when you take a look at entering into the playoffs at a 10-1 price, I'm surprised the Chiefs are in this spot because as Ben and I talked about so much during football season was I kept buying into the Chiefs late in the season by how easy their schedule was. I thought there was a path to the Super Bowl because not only were they going to be a good football team as they are, I thought they would be hosting once again the AFC Championship being the number one seed. They weren't the number one seed. Are you as shocked as I am, Mike, that the Chiefs are in the Super Bowl at this point, having to go on the road to Buffalo and Baltimore?
Shocked is a tough term to use here. I think the 10-1 entering the playoffs number that we just showed on the graphic seems spectacularly silly now. They still have the best player in the world on their team. Mm-hmm. We know a lot of the things that went wrong, but the defense was not going wrong really at any point during the season. Every team is going to get got at some point. It's happened to the Niners against the Ravens. It happened to the Chiefs against the Raiders. And I just think you have to oftentimes, Donnie, particularly with favorites, we talk about this a lot, whether it's one single game or an entire season, you have to understand that the odds are baking in the entire game or the entire season. So the Chiefs were favorites for a reason. There's peaks and valleys to it, but to say that I'm shocked that they beat the Ravens and the Bills, no, I bet on them both times to cover. I did think the Ravens would beat them. I thought that was going to be a tight game, but I don't think the Bills had enough. And I still think that this coaching tandem of Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo, amazingly, is still underrated. Maybe it's because Spags didn't have a good head coaching stint, but he is lights out in the second half of every freaking game.
Some people are just better as coordinators when they can focus on one side of the football. KC's second best scoring defense in the NFL throughout the regular season. Best second half scoring defense all year long around the National Football League. So this Kansas City team is different than the previous three we have seen appear in a Super Bowl. It might be defense first for San Francisco for most of the year, looked at as a juggernaut around the National Football League. Blue, as we compare these two teams, the tail of the tape for the 49ers and the Chiefs, of these two clubs, what do you think is the best individual unit on either side?
That's a really good question. When everybody is playing their best, I'll just say it like this. When everybody is playing their best, it is really hard to slow down the Niners offense. They just have so many weapons. They're so diverse. Now, I don't think we haven't seen their fastball except for 20 minutes against the Lions in the playoffs. But when every unit is playing their best, it's hard to knock the Shanahan offense with this level of weaponry off their best game. I think that is what I would choose, but I have to pick the Chiefs offense a close second because Mahomes is there. It's not as diverse. They only have really Pacheco and Kelsey to rely on, but Rashee Rice is no slouch. The guy's a rookie having an incredible season. So I think it's worth noting that I don't think they're a distant second, but I think if I'm picking the four units, it's them. And there may have been points during the season where we could have ranked the Chiefs offense or Chiefs defense, or it's rather the Niners defense is number one, but Niners defense giving up a lot on the ground. And I would think the Chiefs defense stacks up even better than them right now.
Take a look at the points to be scored in this game. The one thing we usually see is some line movement. We've had that on the side, but the total, FanDuel opened up here, Mike, 47.5. Where do we sit today on a Friday ahead of Super Bowl week next week? Still the same at 47.5. What are you looking at from a points perspective in this game for Super Bowl 58?
Solid number. Donnie, it's the type of number that I think you and I probably could have picked, and they nailed it. I think they know that it's going to be hard for that number to move because we're looking at a score that should be right around there. You know, we're looking at a 24-21 type, 26-23 type of score getting in that range. So I think it's a good number. I'm going to split it up certainly and look at second half unders. The Chiefs fourth quarter unders this year, 19-1. So I think you're looking at numbers like that as opposed to maybe the entire game. You see me on here splitting up the Niners numbers a lot too. So I think I'll do that instead of maybe worrying about sweating the whole game.
Was it last year's Super Bowl or last year's playoffs or maybe 2 years ago now that Mike Blewitt correctly predicted the final score of a significant NFL game?
Rams Bengals Super Bowl. I nailed it.
23-20. That was the final score.
Folks.
In
$20.
So
take a shot.
Is it too? Listen, we got 9 days. Is it too early to ask for a correct score prediction? Do you want to wait until next week? Not give away the secret sauce before? All right, fair enough.
I got 5 shows. So you're in the radio and TV business. I can't tease it until I'm live in Vegas.
Yep, that's a good
for
move.
sure. No, I completely agree.
Ben hasn't done
this. You should tease it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, not many times. I get that. So listen, Blue, if you're not going to give us a correct score prediction, give us your correct pick for who wins Super Bowl MVP.
Super Bowl MVP is a great one. If you're not putting a couple of bucks on Isaiah Pacheco, what are you doing? We're here all year helping you out. The guy touched the ball 28 times in the last game. If he breaks a few free, I know it's still a long shot. It's a long shot for a reason. Isaiah Pacheco, 35-1. Let's go.
Do you hate Rutgers football? No? Bet Isaiah Pacheco. Mike Blewitt back for a second segment next.
Super Bowl is set in Vegas. We get a rematch from just a few years ago.
The only consistency in the playoffs has been Travis Kelce.
Brock Purdy, back-to-back weeks throwing 1 touchdown pass, right? You can't win MVP with 1 touchdown pass.
I hate the Chiefs, but I bet on them.
This is going to be a game that is played inside a field goal now from a spread perspective.
All that matters is there's 1 game left, the big game.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
I can tell you, like, Las Vegas is heavy San Francisco territory. All right, there are a ton of Niner fans, man, in Las Vegas and in Nevada, and specifically Reno. Reno's close, obviously, right? So, like, Reno's numbers will be a little bit different, but the total of 47.5. I get it.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
Jordan Clarkson is a walking bucket. He will shoot you in games. He will shoot you out of games. But he is the perfect 6th man for a team looking for bench production. A guy that can go get his own shot.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Purdue on the road in a very difficult place to win in Piscataway, New Jersey. Not in Jersey Mike's Arena, but in the rack. And it was tight.
You still have to win these games. Like, you can talk about even equate it to the NBA. Like OKC just rolling into Detroit, going like, yeah, this is going to be an easy victory, and not coming away with the W because you're not focused here. Good move there for the Purdue Boilermakers. You can take a look at Zach Edey.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
One that's been to a sporting event. The atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
9 days away from Super Bowl Sunday, Super Bowl 58 in Las Vegas. We have given you the overall approach from where the game odds stand right now for Super Bowl 58. San Francisco, a 2.5-point favorite, minus 130 money line for the 49ers, plus 110 for the Chiefs as an underdog. The over-under remains at 47.5. Let's dive even deeper. Prop perspective. The individuals that will impact who hoist that Lombardi trophy 9 days away in Las Vegas. Mike Blewitt back with us for a second consecutive segment. Blue, of course, we start with the quarterback comparison. I ask you a two-part question. We'll go step by step. We begin with Patrick Mahomes, who has the higher of the two passing yards props for Super Bowl 58, 262.5. First part of the question, can Kansas City win a Super Bowl if Patrick Mahomes stays under 262.5?
Yeah, I think so. We just talked about Pacheco at 35-1. Obviously, it's not out of the question at all. I think if Pacheco is touching the ball 28 times again, they scored 17 points last week and won the game. I don't think they can do that in this one, but yeah, I think Mahomes could come in at 250, have an efficient day. Look at his games thus far. What was he, 17 of 23 against Buffalo? They didn't have to light it up. Pacheco's been really good for them. Even though Pacheco hasn't put up big numbers, he's getting a large amount of touches. So, yes, I think that's possible. But I would note that, and this may lead to another question. I mean to step on it, but Kelsey's got his work cut out for another week. He aced the test last week, but Greenlaw and Fred Warner might be at another level from Queen and Roquan Smith.
We will get to Travis Kelce in just a moment. Second part of my follow-up in that quarterback comparison board, 245.5 is the number for Brock Purdy. What do the 49ers need out of Purdy on Super Bowl Sunday to win that Lombardi trophy?
I think that's also a yes, by the way, if you say, can they come under that number and still win the game? Christian McCaffrey is obviously a big factor for them. But if I'm making a correlation, I think it is of more importance for Brock Purdy to have efficient and perhaps prolific passing game in order to beat the Chiefs than it is the other way around. Maybe that's the opposite thinking from some, but I do think that there's I think if Brock is out there and having a good first half and hitting Ayuk and Debo for big plays, I think that's the type of start the Niners need to get off to in order to make sure they're putting up enough points on the Chiefs in that first half.
Yeah, I need to see some aggression right out of the bat there from Kyle Shanahan. Wasn't happy with his last Super Bowl performance against the Kansas City Chiefs. I thought they needed to be more aggressive, and they weren't. We'll see how that translates. But the one thing that we do know, Mike, is Christian McCaffrey has been the lead dog all season long for the San Francisco 49ers, and we don't expect anything less in Super Bowl 58. Two questions for you. Number one, the prop bets here, obviously, rushing yards at 90.5, receiving yards 34.5, and anytime touchdown at minus 220. But we're a week out from the Super Bowl. The last time we saw Christian McCaffrey landing on his head out of bounds and getting his neck worked on. Are you worried about McCaffrey at all heading into the Super Bowl, or is it just full go all the way through these numbers?
You have to be somewhat concerned. He couldn't finish the game. He didn't finish the game. So I think they're keeping it under wraps. I think we'd know more if it was significant. Like, for example, we know about the Joe Thuney being out. We knew about that before the AFC Championship game. I think there would be more buzz about his inability to go or how much he's compromised before now. There'd be some story, I think, already. So it leads me to believe that they're working on it. Maybe he's not 100% right now, which players are at this point of the season. And I think it's a full go. But if Eli Mitchell had to come in and take a few carries, I think we have to be prepared for that.
90.5 is Christian McCaffrey's rushing yards prop. 34.5 his receiving yards number. You can see what is expected out of Christian McCaffrey, a combo prop that is north of 130 yards at this moment. He very well might be Super Bowl 58's most important individual player come a week from Sunday. On the other side, you already said at a 34-1 number, why not put a couple of bucks down on Isaiah Pacheco to win Super Bowl 58? for Super Bowl 58's MVP for Kansas City. 67.5 is his rushing yards prop. 16.5 attempts, the carries number for Super Bowl 58, minus 140 for Pacheco to find Pater, something he has done every single game this postseason for Kansas City. Blewitt, how do you describe Pacheco's emerging role in this Chiefs offense?
I think what we've seen from the Chiefs is a very heavy concentration of what their offense is. Yes, Marquez Valdez-Scantling had a couple of big plays, but they really have whittled it down to 3 options. The Chiefs, historically, particularly when Eric Bieniemy was there, I'm not saying that he was pulling the strings on the offense. It's clearly Andy Reid, but they did a really good job of spreading out the number of targets, right? Yes, it was Kelsey and Tyreek Hill, but they would mix in some touches to the backs and the tertiary receivers. So we still see the Justin Watson and MVS and those types of touches happen, but we've seen this offense really concentrate on 3 guys, and that's Kelsey, Pacheco, and Rashee Rice. With obvious exceptions. So his role in the offense, his ability to help them run out the clock. Everybody talks about his running style, which is so fun to see. It's even more fun to see that he was a late round draft pick from, obviously, we've got Big Ten Ben on here, so from a Big Ten school. I think it's just very cool the way that he's emerged and how he's become such a crucial part of the offense. I've always been sort of waiting for him to be an even bigger part of the passing offense, but it doesn't really happen that much. 4 targets last week, though, only for 14 yards. I think they look for some chunk plays with him, and if it doesn't work, they back to the drawing board. But again, 28 touches last week, 16 before that, 25 before that. So this is the time of year where these teams are going to lean on their most valuable assets.
Yeah, most of the time here throughout the NFL season, and quite frankly for the past decade, it's really been a backfield by committee in most instances, and particularly in Kansas City. It's actually refreshing to go into a Super Bowl and say, no, there's a lead dog here that's going to get the majority of the playing time, and obviously the same thing with the San Francisco 49ers. Mike, let's flip it over to the San Francisco 49ers wide-out position, weapons across the board, Brandon Ayuk and also Deebo Samuel. If it's going to be a reception prop, a yardage prop, a touchdown prop, where are you going between Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel?
Really good question, Donnie. I think Ayuk is important for them. But to be fair, I thought that last week as well. I thought Ayuk was going to be a much bigger part of their success offensively than he ended up being. Frankly, the big play for him was a complete busted lucky break. 51 yards of his 68 yards were on a lucky bounce. He didn't really do anything outside of that, but we did see Deebo do a lot. And the fact that Deebo was able to put up, I think it was 8 for 89 last week, I certainly quelled our fears about his health. And I think that you can more readily get Deebo into the offense here than you can Ayuk. You are dealing with serious corners like Snead that can cover on the outside. That is a weakness for the Lions. It is not for the Chiefs. So Deebo across the middle of the field, I think that's going to be really interesting for him going up against Nick Bolton and other guys. But I'd lean towards Deebo versus Ayuk, plus the number is lower here.
Obviously, there was concern. There was a 50-50 status at one point last week getting ready for Conference Championship Sunday for Deebo Samuel and his availability in the NFC title against Detroit. His receiving yards number was only 47.5. Brandon Ayuk, the highest for San Francisco, 80 and a hook. It was Samuel that ended up with 89 yards on 8 grabs, leading receiver for San Francisco, most targets for the 49ers last week against the Lions as well. Blewitt, you mentioned Travis Kelce, who on the most significant stages for Kansas City throughout this dynastic run has always risen to the occasion. At least 71 receiving yards in all 3 playoff games this year, 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games to send Kansas City back to another Super Bowl. You said earlier in the show, he has passed all 3 tests so far this postseason. Will he make it a perfect 4 for 4 on Super Bowl Sunday against the 49ers?
Man, this is the ultimate test. I would not want to be having to rely on a tight end against this team, but we've seen it time and time again, even in games where they're getting blown out like they did against the Bucs. in the Super Bowl, Kelsey still put up numbers. So I think they're going to force it. I think he's too big a part of what they're trying to do. They're going to have to be more creative because Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner can cover. I just think that he's too important to the team. I can't see us being in a position where Kelsey goes 4 for 37 and the Chiefs win the game. I think he's too important.
So as we have Mike Blewitt here on this Football Friday, we are just a few days away from being in Las Vegas inside the media center on Radio Row for Super Bowl 58, where some of us at the BetMGM Sportsbook. Blewitt, tell the SportsGrid audience where they can see you next week out in Las Vegas.
So obviously be with the guys on Radio Row during the week, various spots, but I'm going to be holding it down at the MGM Sportsbook. That show will be a variety of different guests and topics throughout the week. Adam Kaplan, people that are with our network and not with our network. That will air 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern live every night, live on SportsGrid. And I'll be at the MGM Sportsbook floor like we were for the draft a couple of years ago in Vegas.
Mike Blewitt, live in prime time during Super Bowl week out in Las Vegas. Blue, safe travels. We'll see you out in the desert. A triple option for Super Bowl 58 next.
Super Bowl is set in Vegas. We get a rematch from just a few years ago.
The only consistency in the playoffs has been Travis Kelce.
Brock Purdy, back-to-back weeks throwing one touchdown pass, right? You can't win MVP with one touchdown pass.
Hey, I hate the Chiefs, but I bet on them.
This is going to be a game that is played inside a field goal now from a spread perspective.
All that matters is there's one game left, the big game.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
I can tell you, like, Las Vegas is heavy San Francisco territory. All right, there are a ton of Niner fans, man, in Las Vegas and in Nevada, and specifically Reno. Reno's close, obviously, right? So, like, Reno's numbers will be a little bit different, but the total of 47.5. I get it.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
Jordan Clarkson is a walking bucket. He will shoot you in games. He will shoot you out of games. But he is the perfect sixth man for a team looking for bench production. A guy that can go get his own shot.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Purdue on the road in a very difficult place to win in Piscataway, New Jersey. Not in Jersey Mike's Arena, but in the Rack. And it was tight.
You still have to win these games. Like, you can talk about even equate it to the NBA. Like OKC just rolling into Detroit going, yeah, this is going to be an easy victory, and not coming away with the W because you're not focused here. Good move there for the Purdue Boilermakers. You can take a look at Zach Edey.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
One that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Normally here on a Football Friday, to end out our third hour, we give you picks and bets for the NFL weekend. Well, there's not actually an NFL game this weekend. There are the Pro Bowl games, but I'll let you determine if you're going to watch those. No betting odds, at least, for the Pro Bowl games. We are 9 days away from Super Bowl Sunday. Super Bowl 58 in Las Vegas, the Chiefs and the 49ers. So it's not a full pick six, but it's a triple option, which is what I love to do. Establish the run here on the early line. Our favorite side, our favorite total, our favorite prop. As we see it now, still over a week away from Super Bowl 58. Donnie, before we dive into the picks, again, let's go big picture one final time, looking at where the Super Bowl 58 odds are at this moment before both you and I head out to Las Vegas tomorrow. The next time you will see us live on the SportsGrid Network, Monday, 8 a.m. Eastern time in our normal spot, but not on our normal set. We'll be live in Las Vegas on the Super Bowl Radio Row inside the Mandalay Bay Convention Center there in the Super Bowl Media Center. It won't be the early line, but don't be scared. It's Pro Football Today. It's me, it's Donnie, it's Kevin, it's Joe Lisi. It will be a heck of a week. 2.5-point spread in favor of San Francisco, over under at 47.5. Donnie, the next time people hear from us on Monday morning, do you expect these odds to look different in any way?
I don't, because I think the next movement here is going to come from us once we start getting and practice reports next week by Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and also the flood of public money that's going to come over the top on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So I expect it. Let's call it 2 and 2.5 as the same. I would be surprised if we're at a 3 or a 1.5 by the time we meet up on set in Las Vegas on Monday. I think we're settling into the spot, and then that number might get pushed around a little bit, half point each direction by the end of the week with all that public money flooding in.
I do not think this is going to close at a field goal in favor of San Francisco. If it does, I think that very late move would come Saturday into Sunday before we get to Super Bowl 58 in the kickoff around 6:30 p.m. Eastern time in 9 days. You can look at the juice right now. To get the 2.5 points with Kansas City, it's minus 115. Elsewhere on the FanDuel Sportsbook, if you were to look at alternate spreads and just to see KC at this normal number, it's minus 122. I don't think we see that hook added on to that number and a flat number of 3 by the time we at least talk next week in Las Vegas. A couple of the trends for these teams, of course, Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes. He has started a game for the Chiefs in his 6-year NFL career as a starting quarterback, booked as an underdog 12 times. He is now 9-3 straight up, including both outright victories on the road in Buffalo and on the road in Baltimore throughout this postseason. 10-1-1 against the number 4 Mahomes as the underdog in his career. The San Francisco 49ers have played 20 football games. They have played 19 football games, rather. They have been favored in all 19. The 49ers have only been less than a touchdown favorite with Brock Purdy as the starting quarterback 6 times this year, Donnie, both 4 and 2 straight up and against the number for San Francisco, at least in the football games the odds makers expected to be more competitive than most for the Niners this season.
Yeah, and rightfully so. I think we can also agree on, from start to finish in the totality of the season, the 49ers' path, even though they had a couple bumps in the road, some injuries to worry about, concussion issues for Brock Purdy, Deebo Samuel missing games, same thing with Christian McCaffrey getting a little bit dinged up. I think the better overall team throughout the season was the San Francisco 49ers moving through. But that being said, the Kansas City Chiefs have been there and done that. This isn't one of those teams where you talk about, let's just say, Ben, like the Green Bay Packers, the youngest team we've ever seen in the playoffs try to make a run. Ooh, that's really surprising. You have Andy Reid, who's a multiple-time Super Bowl champion, has been to the Super Bowl quite a few times. Patrick Mahomes, same thing. They're expected to perform at the biggest stages and play extremely well, and they've done that. So when we're looking at the Super Bowl, it's a pretty even matchup. But for me, I think for the totality of the season, again, the 49ers overall were the better team, but one team has the pedigree, one team trying to earn that status as, you know what, maybe we go on a run for the next couple years.
Of course, it is a Super Bowl 54 rematch 5 years ago in Miami, or 4 years ago at least in Miami. It was between the Chiefs and the Niners. Kansas City closed as a 1.5-point favorite. The over-under was loftier at 53 points. KC rallied from down 20-10 late in the third quarter to win 31-20, covering as a 1.5-point favorite. That total, even though it eclipsed the 50-point mark, did stay under 53 as that closing pregame over-under. Now, our focus is Super Bowl 58 and the rematch here. Our favorite side, total, and prop early on, still over a week out from Super Bowl 58. We start with your favorite side. Donnie, what is it?
I don't think this is going to change, but also, as we started out this week, the anger in my voice on Monday, not necessarily from a perspective like, oh, I can't believe the Ravens lost and the Kansas City Chiefs had no business winning that game. The Chiefs are a formidable opponent. That game was under a 5-point spread, and one team has again. Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. But the handicap of I don't care about the Super Bowl, as long as Mahomes is in it, they're going to win it because that's just the way it always goes. There's something to it because Patrick Mahomes might end up being the greatest football player we've ever seen in our lifetimes, and that does include Tom Brady when it's all said and done. We'll see where it goes from here. But if we're just lining up the Super Bowl myself, sometimes you have to take all those emotions out of the equation, Ben, and settle on what do you think is going to play out in this football game. I have an unbelievable wide receiver / tight end core on San Francisco coming into this game with a very good offensive line. The best single player in football outside of the quarterback position, it's probably Christian McCaffrey. I have them on my side. How do you shut down Patrick Mahomes' offense? It's hard to do. They're not as explosive, Ben, as what they've been in the past. But I have an elite front four that should be able to get pressure consistently without blitzing, which should help the back seven guys out in covering. So for myself, it's the San Francisco 49ers. I'll lay the 2.5 points, take the emotions out of it, and just say, once again, if I think I have the better team, and I do in San Francisco, and it doesn't work out, you just tip your cap and move on and say, Ben, you know what? Maybe it was. You just can't go after Patrick Mahomes. But I'm going to play that risk again in the Super Bowl where I think I have the better team here, and I'll pick them to win, which is San Francisco.
And it is worth noting how the line has gotten to 2.5 at this moment. It opened at 2.5 following Conference Championship Sunday, quickly was bet down as everybody was with the same belief, well, you can't bet against Patrick Mahomes anymore, and you're going to make him the underdog once again. 77% of the handle for the spread bet so far for Super Bowl 58, all on Kansas City. That worked the line to a 1.5. Donnie pointed that out earlier in this week. Now it's worked back up to 2.5. It's not like the public handle is down to 60% only for Kansas City. Some sharp money coming in on the 49ers. And who could fault you still laying under a field goal with San Francisco? I just think the Chiefs have found their rhythm. I think Kansas City has figured out what has worked so well for them here down this home stretch. From the end of October through Christmas, Kansas City dropped 5 of 8 games. The disaster in Arrowhead on Christmas Day against the Las Vegas Raiders. People rightfully so, question this Chiefs team and its outlook. They weren't going to stumble to miss a playoff berth, but could they do anything in the postseason? They get a big win week 17 against the Bengals, but whoop-de-doo, it's Jake Browning. And then they don't even start Mahomes and Kelsey and the starters week 18 in L.A. But what we have seen here out of Kansas City in the postseason is a team that relies on defense in the most critical stages. I think they do that once again. Kansas City money line for me at plus 110, which I think correlates to the defense under Steve Spagnuolo being the main reason Kansas City is here and being the main reason the Chiefs can win a Lombardi trophy for a second consecutive season. They would be the first back-to-back champs to win 2 consecutive Super Bowl championships since the Patriots in 04 and 05. Now your favorite total for Super Bowl 58. What gets your attention?
It's interesting because we talked about with Mike, and again, just about with every guest we've had on this week, that 47.5 is such an interesting number because most of the time you would see a Chiefs and a 49ers offense bat and immediately go like, I don't care who's on defense. Both of these offenses are going to cruise up and down the field, which isn't the case. And that's why we haven't had any movement here at the FanDuel Sportsbook on that 47.5. But I do think if we're taking a look again at the totality of the season, the one thing I do note, the Chiefs do have a competent offense. Kelsey might be the best tight end to ever play football, and Patrick Mahomes might be the best quarterback. And when it's all done again, maybe even Andy Reid's the best head coach of all time. The game plan should be set, which means those scripted plays in the first quarter, like we saw Patrick Mahomes open up in Baltimore, 10 of 10 from the field, I think that's going to be a legitimate chance it could happen again in the Super Bowl. And if the Kansas City Chiefs do get a lead at the break, we know they've been known to stranglehold the second half by just moving the chains, punting the football, not turning it over, and playing good defense. I'm going to go with the first half total over 23.5 because also part of this for me is Kyle Shanahan in the last Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo felt he had a defense that was good enough to shut down Patrick Mahomes and said, you know what, Jimmy, just don't make those mistakes here and keep us in the ball game. It burned them in the end. I don't think they're going to do that in this football game. I look for a great first half offensively, and we'll take what we get maybe in the second half. Give me the over 23.5 in the first half for me, Ben.
I think it is a great look. You look at the Chiefs this year, and it correlates exactly to my total as well. AFC championship game over this number of 23.5. AFC divisional round against Buffalo, well over this number of 23.5. Buffalo scored 24 points against KC. They did not score in the fourth quarter. Kansas City scored a touchdown in the fourth quarter in Western New York in the divisional round. It was 40 seconds in to that final stanza. That was the last scoring we saw of the game with 14 minutes and 20 seconds remaining in regulation. Why? The Chiefs have been the best second half scoring defense in the National Football League all year long, only allowing just a tick over 7 points per game. You heard Mike Blewitt. Fourth quarter unders for Kansas City in their 20 games this year. 19 under, 1 over. I looked at the fourth quarter number. 13.5. 2 touchdowns pushes you over. Did not love that. So I go second half total under 23.5 to expect Kansas City to stand tall and maybe even San Francisco to ire things out defensively in those final 30 minutes. Second half total under 23.5. Wouldn't that be a wonderful semblance for both of us? Donnie over in the first half, me under in the second half. Favorite prop for Super Bowl 58, 9 days away, is what?
I love Deebo Samuel because I know you have 2 weeks to prepare, and it looks like Deebo Samuel is healthy for the Super Bowl. Kyle Shanahan is going to dial up a ton for him. Whether it's rushing, receiving, anytime touchdown market, he will be a big-time player in this game. I liked him in the NFC Championship game, even coming off of that shoulder injury to go over his receiving prop, and he did. I'll do the same thing in the Super Bowl. We're going to go Deebo Samuel over 56.5 receiving yards on Super Bowl Sunday.
Donnie, as you well know, there are so many different things to look at. We have time to dive into every single prop, and we will next week in Las Vegas. It wasn't until that segment with Mike Blewitt that the Deebo numbers really stood out, maybe getting a slight discount based on what was expected of him entering the NFC Championship game. I go Patrick Mahomes over 25.5 rushing yards. In his 3 Super Bowl appearances, he has gone over this number every single time. 44 last year against the Eagles, 33 against the Buccaneers, 29 with his first Lombardi Trophy, and a rushing touchdown against San Francisco 4 years ago. A best bet for this weekend next.
Super Bowl is set in Vegas. We get a rematch from just a few years ago.
The only consistency in the playoffs has been Travis Kelce.
Brock Purdy, back-to-back weeks throwing 1 touchdown pass, right? You can't win MVP with 1 touchdown pass.
I hate the Chiefs, but I bet on them.
This is going to be a game that is played inside a field goal now from a spread perspective.
All that matters is there's 1 game left, the big game.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
I can tell you, like, Las Vegas is heavy San Francisco territory. All right, there are a ton of Niner fans, man, in Las Vegas and in Nevada, and specifically Reno. Reno's close, obviously, right? So like Reno's numbers will be a little bit different, but the total of 47.5. I get it.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
Jordan Clarkson. Jordan Clarkson is a walking bucket. He will shoot you in games. He will shoot you out of games. But he is the perfect sixth man for a team looking for bench production. A guy that can go get his own shot.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Purdue on the road in a very difficult place to win in Piscataway, New Jersey. Not in Jersey Mike's Arena, but in the rack. It was tight.
You still have to win these games. Like, you can talk about even equate it to the NBA. Like OKC just rolling into Detroit going, yeah, this is going to be an easy victory, and not coming away with the W because you're not focused here. Good move there for the Purdue Boilermakers. You can take a look at Zach Edey.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
One that's been to a sporting event. The atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Closing out our 3 hours together, our week together here on the early line on SportsGrid. I am Ben Stevens. He is Donnie Rightside, and the SportsGrid app never leaves your side. You can download it at both the Apple and the Play Store, or scan that QR code on your screen. In a matter of moments, all of our insight and information, and of course, 5-star plays. Those are known as best bets. So are these. Before we send you into the weekend, we give you a best bet on this Friday. Before we say farewell and goodbye, it is time for bye, bye, bye. DRS, before we head out to Las Vegas, what are we rooting home this Friday evening?
Let's go out to Indiana tonight. It's going to be the Pacers and the Sacramento Kings lining this game up as we talked about it a little bit earlier. You talk about a back-to-back game here for the Pacers, who were in Madison Square Garden and lost that game, now flying back to Indiana to take on the Sacramento Kings, who are already in town waiting after their loss against the Miami Heat. I think it's a great bounce-back spot for the Kings. I'll take the -3. And also, J.Y. talked about, we don't even know who's going to be in the starting lineup primarily for the Pacers. Halliburton might be out of this one. You might get that extra bonus here. I'll lay the 3 with the Kings in Indiana.
I'm looking in the NBA at the Suns on the road in Atlanta. The Hawks, the worst cover team in the NBA this year. Phoenix playing better basketball. They've won 9 of their last 11, including covering in 2 straight wins. But I go to college basketball. What a matchup tonight in the Atlantic 10 between Dayton and St. Bonnie. Now, Dayton has the second best record in conference play. Its only loss to Richmond over the weekend. Dayton's won 7 games in A-10 play so far this year. They have gone under in 6 of those 7. St. Bonnie, well, they have lost 4 games, a 4-4 A-10 record in all 4 losses, which is favored to happen tonight. Dayton laying 7.5 at home. The Bonnies have gone under 134.5 between the Flyers and the Bonnies tonight in a wonderful A-10 top 25 tilt. He is Donnie Rightside. I'm Ben Stevens. We'll see you Monday morning inside Radio Row in Las Vegas at 8 a.m. Eastern.